Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 14 of the Eyes and Ears podcast slash live stream. I am your host, Brad. Today, I will be flying solo. Elon is out doing some family stuff, so he was not able to make it. But I figured, you know what? Let's just carry on with the show. So it'll just be me. We're going to talk about some fun things tonight. If you're here already, I see there's like 6 people joining in. Thank you. Leave a comment, say hello. This is just going to be me tonight. Like I said, Elon is out of the loop today for this week, but he will be back next week dealing with some family stuff. It's all good, but he asked me to basically do this for us. So if you're on his channel and you don't see him, that's why you get to see this face on this video instead. But yeah, I just wanted to dive in. Joel is here. Joel, you're here like every week, man. I want to say thank you so much for stopping by and commenting. And yeah, I actually saw your comment on one of Audioholics' old videos the other day where you're like, "Hey, is this Brad behind the camera and editing?" And yes, that was I. Yeah, we actually started working with the Gene a lot more. He does live close by, so I'll be shooting a lot more and editing for him more to kind of facilitate the income situation a little bit here. And yeah, get back to making some tutorials, which I am shooting this week actually. So mini DSP tutorial should be out next week. Finally, yay! And then all the other tutorials I'm still working on there. So yeah, also Andy V is here. Andy asked, can you do a video on how to use mini DSP with a Pioneer LX505? I do not have a Pioneer LX505. If I do get one, I can, but it should I mean, if it has subwoofer outputs, it should be relatively the same as how it works with any other thing, any other receiver or even pre-pro. So as long as you have a subwoofer out, you should be able to follow the guide. I'll kind of go over that in the new series because I only have access to Denon receivers currently, but the principles should still apply. But I'll kind of go over that as more of a universal hookup type thing. Yeah, Crispy Johnson is here. Good evening, sir. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for joining. Tonight's going to be kind of a fun little discussion. Going to try to keep this a little short. So if you guys have questions, and if anything, just ask me anything that you want to. No, you can. I just might not answer why I'm bald or something. But bald jokes already. I'm running out of material, guys. But no, so if you have a general question, I'm just going to keep it here, general question, no topical questions. Put a GQ in front or just a Q, up to you, really. I just want to be able to see it. If you're watching on Elon's side, I can see the comments there as well. So I will be able to star those and answer them, so you will not be left out. And yeah, so any general questions that you guys have or topical questions, just put a GQ or a Q in front so I can easily see it. If I'm in the middle of something, I may not stop right away to address the question at hand, but I will do my best to see it. Sometimes the comments can get a little crazy, although this topic here, I don't know. You know, sometimes our topics hit, sometimes they don't, but I think it's worth talking about. And also just want to mention that both my channel, Home Theater Gamer, and Elon channel do have super chats, super stickers activated if you guys would like to show your support that way. Not required, but much appreciated. So yeah, if we go ahead and dive in here, I do want to mention something real quick before we do, and that is something I watched recently where the Atmos mix actually surprised me, and that was the Beach Boys documentary on Disney Plus. That actually, I mean, it wasn't the most active Atmos mix, but the LFE was honestly pretty decent on that. I'm also like, I grew up a Beach Boys fan. I was like obsessed when I was a kid. So maybe I'm a little biased towards that. But yeah, if you guys are kind of into the music industry at all and kind of the history of like the whole Beach Boys versus Beatles kind of rivalry thing, but also like how the Beach Boys kind of like came up and then fell down, and then it was a really interesting documentary, especially if you have Disney Plus already. I think it's worth a watch if you're kind of into that sort of thing. If not, no worries, but that actually, surprised me. So yeah, we'll go ahead and dive in here. Crispy Johnson, I do see your comment or your question. Actually, let's just address this real quick here. So he asked, "What are your thoughts on mixing ported and sealed subwoofers in a home theater? I see a lot of pushback to this online, but I've personally had great success. Am I missing something?" I mean, there are multiple uh, kind of negatives to doing that, but there are also like positives. I myself have mixed ported and sealed with success. It just is not as easy to me if everything is sealed or everything is ported. You typically have slight differences in terms of like transient response, which if a subwoofer is quicker or I don't know, they're all drivers at the end of the day, right? But sometimes, especially, I think maybe part of the thing for a lot of people is they may not have the same driver size or the same um, from the same kind of model stack. Now, with certain brands, that's kind of less forgiving. I've had great success mixing kind of like a PB4000 with a PB2000 Pro from SVS, um, or like an SB2000 Pro from SVS mixed with like a PB4000. It's totally doable. It just requires much more kind of fine tuning, in my experience at least. If you want to get things as best as they possibly can be, and you may have to spend more time than if you were to just stick with ported or sealed. I think that there's nothing wrong with experimenting because you're always going to get pushback online from basically anything you do. Anytime I put a video out, it's I'm actually hoping for feedback from people. Like if I do something wrong, I want to know about it. If I and say mixing sealed imported, I think I may have done a video on mixing the two a while ago. I can't honestly, it was probably in the middle of like the whole pandemic lockdown thing. So like it's kind of all a blur. But I think I did a video mixing sealed imported and I had great success with it. Um, I don't know that I would recommend it for everyone. But I mean, it's one thing, it's like, okay, I have sealed subs. And if I get a ported sub or I come across a ported sub, you sure as hell bet I'm gonna try to get them to work together because I that's what I do. I love it. I love the kind of setup and experimentation of this stuff. Much to the dismay of me enjoying things. Like there's sometimes where I just want to sit down and watch a movie, and I may not be able to do that because I'm like I've spent 8 hours calibrating. I'm just exhausted. I'm just exhausted. Like I spend a lot of time experimenting. But yeah, I would say that you're not missing anything. I think if you're going on like Reddit, AVS forum, I mean, there are people that definitely have the data to back up what they're saying. But if you already have them, like if you already have like sealed imported, just try them and see what it sounds like to you, because that's kind of all that matters at the end of the day. Um, I hate to say that in the way of like, yes, I do like to verify things, but there are many times where I've calibrated something and I'll verify it and it looks great on a graph, but then when I listen to it, it sounds all wrong. Subwoofers like calibrating subwoofers, that can happen as well. Like you can actually have like almost like a unevenness. So it sounds like, oh, well, you can really localize bass over here for some reason, or over here to your like it's really something that you won't see on a graph until you listen to it with your ears. So I would say experiment. Don't be afraid to get pushback online. Um, because most of the times what happens with that is, yeah, you may get pushback, but you may also actually realize something too that you can figure out if you sleep on it, or you may go, oh wait, actually that sparks an idea that you didn't think of, and the next thing you know, you're like, you've gotten better performance, or like you figured something out that you didn't even like think about. So I would say just experiment around. Um, so yeah. Oh, Carlos is Jose is here. Van Gool is here. Welcome, welcome. I'm trying to catch up with the comments. I'm sorry. Let's see. I'm gonna, uh, there we go. All right. So I started the comments. Sorry, guys. I was taking a pause here. That's what happens when you don't have two people. You don't have a co-host. Um, that you have to go and do this all yourself. So thanks for bearing with me. So we're gonna go and like just kind of talk a little bit about why I even kind of thought of this here today, and that is this little blurb on a bunch of different news sites here for tech, and that is not the right one. We'll just go with that there. So Sony has seemingly started removing the 8K logo from PS5 boxes. And basically, for those that aren't aware, I mean, I know that this pertains to gaming, but I think it's kind of maybe bigger than that. And some of this is going to be speculation. I don't like to go solely off of that, off of speculation or rumors. But Sony has neither confirmed nor deny any of this kind of going forward. So when the PS5 launched back in 2020, 8K was on the box, and you can actually see it here if we scroll down. I think, yeah, here it is. So 8K, 4K, 120 HDR on the box. What else do they have here on the side? So yeah, here's a shot of the new one. So they've removed 8K from the box. Now, something that I want to talk about is the PS5 has never supported 8K output since its release. There is one game called The Tourist that actually renders in 8K internally and then downsamples to 4K. But it doesn't actually support native 8K output. And there's no games that do. The PS5's firmware has never been updated to support 8K output, like to a display. And I think part of the reason may come down to the fact that if you guys are familiar with this, the PS5 does not have a full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 chipset or I can't even think of the term, but basically, so the maximum capability of HDMI 2.1 is 48 gigabytes per second. Gigabytes, yeah. Whereas the Series X, the Xbox Series X, drops down to 40, and then the PS5 is 32 gigabytes per second. So it's not doesn't have as much bandwidth. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you're doing stuff like certain output modes, it will not be able to utilize the full color space. So you're not going to get 444 color space. You're only going to get like 422 or 420, depending on like what you select. I know we're kind of getting into the weeds with that, but that's kind of the downside to it being limited to 32 gigabytes per second. And I think that also I don't know if it has the bandwidth for 8K at 32. I could be wrong. It may have it for 30 frames per second. I don't know that it could do 60. Now, the speculation part comes in here or where the speculation comes in is, I'm sorry, I got so sidetracked. Yes. I mean, I obviously remember Double Dare with Mark Summers. I love Double Dare. And What Would You Do? Do you remember that one from classic Nickelodeon? Anyway, we're getting off topic here. So the speculation comes in that Sony is launching the PS5 Pro down the road here this year, and that's going to support 8K. That's speculation. Sony's not confirmed it. We'll know once the boxes start coming out if there's like an 8K symbol on there. I don't know that there will be. We'll kind of talk about that a little more later. Because 8K rendering for games is actually where I think one of the bigger benefits of 8K lies. However, you need far more processing power from your graphics card than 4K. And most games out there aren't even hitting 4K. So we're talking about games here, but what about movies? Like the other big issue with 8K, and you guys, may realize this, is where's the content? Like this is we have very little content in the way of 8K streaming out. especially compared to 4K, especially compared to 1080p. I mean, even 4K content still in terms of like overall volume of content pales in comparison to what 1080p is doing. Um, Now, with that said, 4K is becoming kind of the norm and has been for years. It's only going further and further. But this is a site called discover8k.com that I just kind of found when I was doing research on this. And I don't think they've posted anything here since like 2020, 2022. And I did even more research, and there's just not a lot of ways to get content out there. There's YouTube, there's Vimeo, there are gaming consoles, um, even like something like a 4090 on a PC. In a lot of games, current games, 8K is kind of off the table, especially native. Like I don't think any, unless it's a very simple game or a really old game, 8K native is not just a possibility at this point. Um, but talking about movies, so most movies, uh, or not, I don't want to say most movies, a lot of movies still to this day are shot 4K, maybe slightly higher, maybe slightly lower. Some movies are shot even 2.7K, or they may be finished on a 2.7K DI. That's in between. That's kind of like, I don't want to say 1440p, but it's kind of in between 1080 and 4K, right? A lot of the effect shots are still done at like 2.7K. 4K is still not the norm there, unfortunately, which I think for a lot of the Marvel stuff, they're doing most of their like visual effects, like the CGI and stuff, at 2.7K. Um, Now there are obvious differences and obvious movies and stuff that are outliers there, but predominantly, especially with like Marvel stuff, because they've been churning out this content so rapidly. Um, you got to think 2.7K is faster, less resource intensive to render out. Um, yeah, so they can spend more time doing the actual like CGI and get it as good as it can be, unless it's something like, I don't know, what was that movie, The Flash, uh, where you're like, they had like a week to do this, I think. But yeah, so a lot of movies still might have a 4K intermediate. So like the actual video that was shot on location is 4K, but any CGI is done at 2.7K or something like that, and then sharpened and upscaled to 4K to look the part. And for I think most people, it's hard to tell a difference. And so we're already kind of at a point where it's hard to tell a difference sometimes between like 2.7K and 4K. I think one of the most kind of famous examples of that is the Martian 4K Blu-ray is actually 2.7K. It's not 4K at all, but like the biggest benefit with that is the HDR. So I think that going forward, if we're already having an issue telling the difference between 4K and 2.7K and 4K, the difference between 4K and 8K is even more like minuscule. Like it's even harder to detect. And I don't know that like we need it for everything. I don't know that 8K is the right push. I think, better technology, better refresh rates, higher refresh rates for displays, not just for gaming, but it can help with judder on like 24 frames per second content if you have like a 240 hertz panel. And I'm not talking about the like motion interpolation stuff. I'm just saying displaying um, the way that 24 frames per second goes into like 120 or 240 can actually help uh, slightly reduce judder. Um, just depends on the technology as well. OLED's really kind of susceptible to judder, but we don't have any, from my recollection, we don't have any 8K OLEDs. So yeah. Let's see. Kevin Gardner actually threw this up here. Brad, as much as I would like a top tier 4K TV, I keep watching my old 70-inch 1080p Sharp Aquos TV that I found at the recycle center, brought home and repaired in a couple hours. I am often amazed by it. Kevin, that is super awesome. Uh, for years, my wife had a Sharp Aquos TV. It was I think it was like a Best Buy exclusive, and I remember when we first got together, I had like come over to her apartment, and she had like gone to work, um, and I calibrated the TV, like just do a basic, use like digital video essentials, just had some test patterns because we had watched a couple episodes of Stargate SG-1. This was back in like 2016, and it was in vivid mode. It was like the motion interpolation was on, so it had that kind of soap opera effect, and it just it was hard it was hard to watch. Um, so the show for me was not off to a good start based on that. Like I was having trouble seeing the goodness of the show through that, right? And so I calibrated it, and I remember she came home and was like, "Did you buy a new TV?" Because it looked completely different. Like it looked so much better. It looked so much more natural. And I was like, "No, I just literally adjusted a couple settings." And she's like, "You're a genius." And I was like, "Thank you." No, I do not take compliments very well. So, but that's awesome. Like, uh, I mean, I for years I used a 1080p plasma, um, in like the bedroom for like watching stuff until we moved like the Vizio into the bedroom because we have the Hisense in the living room now, and obviously I use like the LG OLED in the theater room. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about like I mean, there's still people that use like a Pioneer Kuro. Now, are you getting HDR? Are you getting all like the bells and whistles that come with like 4K Blu-rays and stuff? No, but I still think the picture holds up. I think it can, depending on the quality of the display. Let's see. Highlight a couple more comments here. Van Gool definitely has a good question here. What size TVs do we need to notice 8K details? Um, well, I think that if we look at 4K, if we just look at that as like a basis, right, where most people already sit too far away from a 4K TV, with 1080p or for like HD TVs, the general rule was you wanted to be about 1.1.5 times away from the like if you had like an 80-inch TV, multiply that by 1.5, and then that will give you the distance at where your vision could resolve that detail, right? The further you go back, and I'm kind of glossing it over it. I'm not like super technical, being super technical about it, but just as like a general rule, right? You'd be 1.5 times away from the screen size of that TV. So 80 times 1.5. As you move back, your eyes become less and less attuned to picking up that detail. It starts hiding certain flaws in the transfer and the material and stuff. And I mean, that's just kind of the par for the course, right? So move over to 4K, and we're now at more of like a 1-to-1. So in order for our eyes to typically resolve that much detail in a 4K display, if it's that same 80-inch size, we need to be 80 inches away from that TV. That's kind of unrealistic for most people, and that's really close for most people too. With 8K, it becomes even more. So it's almost like if 1080p, or I mean, if 4K was like 4 times the resolution. Is it 4 times? My gosh, hold on, I need more coffee. I don't know what I'm saying. Uh, that is right, right? 4K. It's 4 times, right? I I don't know what I'm saying right now. Da-da-da. Anyway, so as the pixel structure goes up, well, you kind of need to move closer in order to resolve all that detail with your eyes, and that's assuming you have 20/20 vision or 20/10, or if you have better vision than that, then you may be at a bit of a advantage there. Uh, but for all intents and purposes, we're looking at with 8K probably like half the screen size to resolve all the pixel detail. So like if it's 80 inches, you probably want to be 40 inches away for your eyes to be able to resolve everything. That's completely like out of the question for pretty much everyone. I don't know about you. I don't like sitting at the front row of an IMAX. I don't like going home like this and like having my head locked in this kind of weird position. But Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's unrealistic, right? And I think the benefits of 8K really uh, like lie in really, really large screen sizes. We're talking about 200 inches plus. I think you may be pushing it at like 150 depending on how far away you sit. Um, but how many homes do you know of that can fit a 200-inch screen, right? And we're talking about just like a 16 by 9. You could probably go with like a 235 screen, like a 21 by 9. That's up to you. I'm just going off 16 by 9 because that's if we're kind of comparing TVs to like a massive screen size. We don't have any uh, TVs that are 200 inches to my knowledge. We do have like micro LED panels that have like they're kind of modular where you can make them as big as you want. Sony has one, but you're getting out of the realm of like what's affordable. And that's the other thing too, like affordability kind of goes out the window the bigger the screen size goes with 8K. Um, so like these modular systems, probably 30, $40,000 for like a 200-inch screen. I mean, we're talking about, we're looking at like billboard size screens at some point here, right? Like they're massive. And now putting that in your home, I mean, it's cool, but like, is it feasible for most people? I don't think so. Um, so like, yeah, I mean, Kevin brings it up here. 8K is just out of the question. No need for it unless you sit 4 feet away. And exactly. That's kind of what the point was here. Um, yeah. Brightness and HDR is what they should focus on now. 8K is pointless. I am of that mindset too. I will add that I would like to see, especially for gaming, higher refresh rates. Like we're kind of getting like Samsung is kind of starting to do like going above 120 hertz into like 144 hertz territory, and I think it's only a matter of time before you start seeing 240 hertz. Um, I think that's because that's also an area where more improvement could be made that would be noticeable, especially for gamers. Maybe not necessarily for like movie watchers or streamers or anything like that. However, it's okay. Like that's the benefits of like you won't have any negligible benefits. You and there may be a thing where it's like, okay, we have this 144 hertz TV and this 240 hertz TV. They're relatively the same TV, but if you want the 240 hertz, you're going to pay a little more. And that's a decision that like someone could make. You're like, oh, well, I don't game, so I'm just going to go with the 144. Whereas someone who's like, I game a lot on PC. I'm going to upgrade my PC eventually. And, as technology like progresses, we could be pushing, these high refresh rates at 4K. I think that's more beneficial than having a screen that you have to literally like be up on like this. That's just my opinion, but I'm like, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this because I did make a video a while ago talking about you don't need 8K, I think was the title of the video. And I still stand by that. I think that's it's a very like small minority um in like the market that would maybe benefit from 8K, like a very small like we're already like kind of in the minority as like home theater enthusiasts, right? Whereas like the kind of average Joe, they just see 8K because it's been marketed as like 8K is better than 4K. It's like, okay, but like it's gonna cost you, it's not gonna be cheap. Where are you gonna get content? Oh, you're not really gonna get content. Everything's gonna be upscaled from 4K basically. Your Blu-ray player, 4K Blu-ray player, game console, they're all gonna output 4K. TV is just gonna upscale it. So yeah, I think that yeah, brightness and HDR along with the refresh rate, I think are the kind of big three that things need to like focus on. Um, and this kind of also ties in like refresh rate ties into what CJ brings up. Now, I have kind of heard this rumor that 3D is going to be making a comeback. Now, 3D never really went anywhere in the theater, I don't think. You can still see real D movies, IMAX 3D, all that stuff. But I think for the home, we may see a resurgence. We may see a resurgence. And you know what? Refresh rate if any of you are familiar with VR, refresh rate in VR and in 3D does play a massive role. However, for movies that are like 24 frames per second in 3D, if you have issues with um, like 3D making you sick or nauseous or dizzy or something, that won't really change with a higher refresh rate display. What will change that is if a movie is shot at a higher refresh rate. So like The Hobbit, parts of Avatar, Frontier, not Frontiers. I've been playing the game. Avatar, Way of the Water. Some of those scenes were shot at a higher frame rate. That's a whole topic for another live stream. Um, but yeah, and then Plasma TV for gaming is here. And he says we need 8K plus no anti-aliasing and 1000 hertz FPS. Yes, I mean you nailed it on the head right there. It won't be cheap, but it'll be awesome. Absolutely. I do like for gaming. So like he brings up a good point. So for gaming, it's kind of where 8K, I think personally, makes the most sense. And not even for 8K output, even. If we had 8K downsampled to 4K, we kind of have that in some games already. It's called super sampling, where you're basically, I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about The Tourist on PS5. You're rendering the game internally at 8K, and then you're downsampling that to 4K. What does that do? Well, it kind of cleans up all the jagged edges. It makes things look super crisp and super sharp. It is costly. You're not going to be able to do that with, say, like Cyberpunk 2077 running maxed out full path tracing. Even on a 4090, I don't even think that would be possible. But it will clean things up a lot. And I will often, because I game at 4K, if I'm playing an older game, like let's say, I don't know, play a lot of Strange Brigade with my friends and family. That's a game that it doesn't have the greatest anti-aliasing at 4K, but I have the overhead on a 4070 Super to bump up that resolution internally to like 200%, right? And I'm still getting 60 frames per second maxed out, and it does wonders for the clarity in the game. Like it makes everything look super crisp, gets rid of a lot of those jagged edges. And I think that's really where the biggest benefit comes from in gaming is being able to like render that 8K image and even downsample it. Although it will look great on an 8K display, we may not even need anti-aliasing at that point because the resolution is so high, right? And I think that's what Plasma TV for gaming is getting at. And thank you Ariel for joining or like stopping by. If you guys have not checked out his channel, Plasma TV for gaming, he does amazing work over there, and he just churns out videos, and I'm kind of like envious of that because it takes me so long to make videos. Uh, so yeah, we had a couple other comments here I want to kind of highlight as we're talking. There we are. Van Gool says we don't have a physical disc that can hold 8K. That's very true. I know there was that disc recently that came out, and I can't remember the space on it, but it was the same size as like a standard disc, but it held like some like exorbitant amount of like data. I can't remember how much it was. It was like big, but again, what are we looking at like in terms of like storage, right? Like how big do we need to go for storage? And, are we looking at codecs for 8K stuff? Are we still using VP9 or any of the codecs that we use for 4K? Are there more efficient codecs that could be used that we notice less, you know, less artifacting and compression? That's an area too. And I think also I was watching Digital Foundry's latest kind of weekly thing that they do, and they were talking about this. And one of them, I think it was Oliver, was talking about, we may get to a point in the future where stuff like Topaz Labs, which is like a kind of offline upscaler for video, and you can do photos with another piece of their software, but for video, it's like all offline because it takes a while. But as technology progresses, CPUs get more powerful. Maybe they offload some of that to the graphics card or something, or it might get to a point where it's efficient enough to run on one of these chipsets that they put inside TVs, right? It is feasible that we could see some type of AI upsampling or similar things within like the chipset of a TV. We're seeing some AI features now, but I think that may be where we kind of start seeing stuff in the future is like on 8K displays. We have, a chip inside that will do the upscaling to 8K fours using like an AI neural network, that type of thing. Skynet, essentially. So James Cameron has his hands in all of this stuff. Quote me on that here. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Let's see here. Joel Gonzalez brings up a good point. I wonder what the next big TV feature will be that will stick. Curved screens came and went, thankfully. So did 3D TVs, now 8K. I feel like, because CJ mentioned 3D, I feel like 3D may end up being like the bell bottoms, jeans, where they kind of make a comeback, or they try to make a comeback. And I don't know if it'll stick. Only time will tell, right? Um, I've never experienced 3D at home. I've only experienced it in the movie theater. I never had the luxury of owning like a TV that could do 3D. We're talking about like, polarized glasses or shutter glasses, not like the anaglyph red and blue or magenta and cyan. Um, those are cool, but I mean, don't you love watching a whole movie like that? And you take them off and like you're seeing like, you know, green and red and like you're seeing like this color cast in your eyes for like an hour after. So fun. So fun. Um, yeah, Willie says I'd love if that happened regarding 3D making a comeback, but he thinks that 3D's rehabilitation is going to take more time for the public. And I agree with that. Since it kind of came and went already, it's going to maybe even be hard, like even harder for it to kind of get a hold in the industry again, like at home, unless they really push it or they really push like, I don't know, some type of technology. I saw it here was like James Cameron, you know, uh, saying he had developed 3D watching without the glasses. Um, and I mean that, yeah, here it is, CJ. So remember James Cameron saying he has developed 3D watching without the glasses. He tried to get the movie theaters to install the equipment, but they say it wasn't in their budget. And I think what he may be talking about is head tracking and eyeball tracking. Um, so like basically the way that would probably work is if you had again, this is just an idea. Like I don't know exactly how the technology works, but if you had a camera on the TV that was a way like that could detect the human or humans, look at like where their heads are positioned and see where their eyes are positioned. And then depending on where you move, like that, like it gives that 3D effect, that kind of parallax, right? It will add depth to the screen. I don't know exactly how it will work. Like, how are you going to send one image to one eye and one image to the other? I don't know. But that's a possibility. It might be like, you know, uh, I do think like head tracking is a big. It may just be like kind of a static signal where like kind of moving the camera, like a virtual camera based on where your head's at. I don't know. Again, this is just speculation. I kind of would be cool to like see that, like technology. I'd love to see what he's talking about. Um, but I don't know. I'm kind of against some of James Cameron's decisions with AI anyway. Having recently checked out the Aliens 4K Blu-ray. I didn't think it was as bad as everyone was saying. It wasn't like a T2 situation, but I actually ended up going back to the Blu-ray and found that there was more detail on the Blu-ray than what's on the 4K version, which is crazy. They scrubbed a lot of the grain out and just kind of made it look weird. But anyway, let's see. Oh, Vanderhoff, I just got a Dolby Atmos receiver a couple months ago. Yes, welcome to the Dolby Atmos Club. It's awesome. I cannot live without it. My wife and I've been watching Stargate SG-1 upmix through DTSX, Neural X, and it sounds great, especially the later seasons. Like we just finished season 7 tonight, actually, and I was still like enthused at how well it upmixed considering the age of the show. I mean, we're talking about a 20-year-old TV show. It sounded really, really good. Obviously, some kind of weird choices due to it being on a TV schedule, but that's kind of par for the course. But yeah, welcome to the Dolby Atmos Club. That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's see here. That is a good question, Van Gool. He says he wonders what Netflix will charge for 8K. Someone said $50 a month. I wouldn't put it past them. Um, it's funny every time because we'll kind of start and stop our Netflix subscription depending on like what we're watching. Although we've kept it here for a while, just because I've been rewatching some of the old like Haunting of Hill House shows. Because there's something about those shows. We watched those shows back when I just had like a 5.1 system, so I wasn't getting any of the Atmos height effects that were in those shows. And some of the audio in there is really freaking cool. The same with Stranger Things, like the later seasons. I had like a 5.2 setup when we watched Stranger Things, but ever since I added like don't get me wrong, the addition of like two more height channels. So now I have top fronts and top rears is great. It was adding the back surrounds that have made such a noticeable like improvement in surround sound like ever since I kind of did the revamp that I'm just like I'm rewatching stuff. I'm playing games like Alan Wake's DLC, Alan Wake 2's DLC came out. I'm playing that. And I'm like hearing stuff behind me. I'm like, I didn't get this before. It was a great experience before, but like having the two like back surrounds has really made a difference. I'm like super surprised. So, yeah, I don't know why I went off there, um, on that tangent, but yeah, I think it is just kind of awesome to have the technology we do. Let's see. You know, I would almost. I know this is like I think they already charge too much. Personally, oh, that's what I was saying. God, sorry. Again, that's what happens when it's just me. Um, Going back to Netflix, they're always raising their prices, so we'll start and stop the subscription. But what I've noticed is every time we restart, within like a month, we'll get an email saying they're raising the price another $2 or $3, and it's like I just like I'm already paying like a crazy amount of money to you. What I feel like for this, and it's like you're raising it more. Like it just keeps going up. I'm like, what are you offering me in return other than like more TV shows that I may never watch? I'm not going to watch Bridgerton. I'm not going to watch all these shows that they're kind of coming out with. I mean, some of them, like I've heard great things about Three Body Problem. I may end up watching that, but yeah, it's just like they keep raising the prices, and it doesn't seem that they do it like with any rhyme or reason. It's just like every few months they're like, let's just have like people pay more. Like this is what we want to do. There's no like set schedule. It's like in a year we're gonna raise the price. It's more like every 3 months they're like, we're losing a lot of people, so we need to up the price. So, but yeah. So going back to what I was saying though, I think that um I would pay. I feel like I'm paying what I should be paying now if they offered uncompressed audio. I would love to have like a Dolby Atmos or DTSX lossless codec. I think most people wouldn't notice a difference. I would say most people. The average Joe, like watching on a sound bar, probably wouldn't notice a difference. But my point of the whole thing is like, I just want to remove that that kind of barrier that I want to know like, hey, I'm getting lossless. I don't really need to worry about like, is this because it's like, am I losing stuff because it's lossy? That's really what it is. That peace of mind that I'm getting the lossless audio, and that's really what it comes down to. So yeah, this 8K His 8K going away stream is turned into an audio stream, which is fine. I'm happy about it. I'm happy about it. But no, I don't think. I think if 8K is going to have any type of positive or not positive, if 8K is going to be able to kind of penetrate the industry in any like meaningful way, it's going to have to do it sooner rather than later. I think that like the time will come where it's kind of be kind of like a fork in the road type thing, right? We already have people that, I mean, still they'll buy a 4K TV and use a regular Blu-ray player. They're not even playing 4K Blu-rays. So that's kind of where I was going earlier when I was talking about we're in the minority, in that people don't or may not be aware that they're losing out on stuff, by just playing a Blu-ray. They're not getting HDR. Like, to me, one of the biggest benefits of like a lot of the new TVs is like a great HDR experience. And so if you're just playing 4K Blu-ray, or I mean just standard Blu-rays, you're not getting that benefit. And that to me is like HDR is something that regardless of resolution, even if it's 1080p, you can see the HDR difference. You can see the difference that makes from anywhere in the room, regardless of the distance that you're at from the display, right? Whereas like 4K, you kind of need to be close. 8K, you need to be even closer. And I think that, focusing more on like improving the HDR experience, maximizing like the peak brightness. Not saying like I want to watch sunglasses when I'm watching TV, but like for those specular highlights, increase like getting the peak brightness at kind of like its max potential. I think that's where the focus should be. And I think that, the industry is just kind of more or less wanting to push the 8K because I think it's simpler to market, right? I mean, obviously, you could say 1080p to 4K is X amount of pixels more. Like 4K is gonna be crispier. 8K, it's easier to market that because it's eight is higher than 4, so 8 is obviously better. Whereas like you go in, you're like, oh yeah, this TV does 1,000 nits of HDR, or like that's a maximum brightness of 1,000 nits. This TV's 4,000. People are gonna be like, I don't, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I don't like a lot of people might, I think a lot of people do go into these stores kind of and might think that they're like, I don't know what the 1,000 nits, what is a nit? Like, I don't even know what that is. Where they may be, brainwashed in a way by the industry to be like 4K better than 1080p, 8K is better than, 4K. And brainwash might be the wrong word, but it's like they've been marketed that, like that's kind of been the target, right? So I think also having more out there in terms of like the understanding of what HDR is, because there's still a lot of misinformation about what HDR is. I mean, if you've been on Reddit or AVS forum, you've seen posts where people will get a display that's like has HDR. They've seen HDR in the showroom. They've seen like the LG demos, the Sony demos, Samsung, what have you. They get it home and they expect that same punchy picture quality that they got from the demo on the Lord of the Rings, right? Like on a 4K, like on Stranger Things. They expect that level of quality on that, and they don't get it. And then they're like, what the hell happened? Like, what is wrong? Like, that's not the picture that I bought, And there's like a misunderstanding that comes from that. So I think like educational stuff, like kind of making people aware, like this is a demo. When you get it home, like movies are going to look different. Shows are going to look different than this. Not everything's going to look the same. I think that is also something that is like not talked about enough in terms of like how they're marketing stuff. So and we see it with games all the time too. You know, there's like something called creator's intent. So like what someone wants, or like what a director, creative director wants a show or movie or video game to look like. And then we get it and we're like, I don't like that. I don't think that's the way it should look. Well, how do we know? Games are a little harder to pin down because I think there's just so many more moving parts. Whereas like there is a standardization in the like film and TV industry for like color grading and things like that. Whereas like I don't know if that same standard exists for video games. So there's a lot of kind of leeway, a lot of things outside of the box, which is why I think we get a lot of games that have broken HDR because there's no set standard, or it might just be an afterthought and they throw it in to tick a box on the, on a website, or say, hey, this does support HDR, even though it's like standard dynamic range and HDR container. It's not true HDR. So like, I think like there's definitely like some misinformation that could be addressed by a lot of these companies, but I think it's just harder to market that kind of stuff. I think that they look at the bottom line to go, we're going to spend a lot of time and money trying to educate people on this, and will it even work? Well, I don't know, and it's a lot of money. So let's see here. Okay, I feel like I've talked enough now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, until you're, that's what I was saying earlier. Until you're 200 plus inches on a screen size, 8K is not going to make a difference. And even then, I think it'd be hard pressed to see the difference unless you have eagle eyes. Let's see. Oh, Joe and Tell is in the house, popping in for a while before I have to prepare for our podcast. Well, thanks, Joe, for popping in. Yeah, it's just me tonight, so I'm probably going to keep it on the shorter side. We normally run for about 2 hours, but I'm probably going to end up doing about an hour and a half here. But yeah, 8K, man. Joe, what are your thoughts on 8K? Post in the comment. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm curious, Joe, what you think. I think 8K is kind of completely pointless. But that's my mindset. But if you have other he got a thesaurus and said pointless, and then useless is like right next to it. No, yeah, I mean, it really is. We're at a point now where I just feel like I just don't know I don't know if it'll catch on. I just don't know. And Kevin Gardner does bring up a good point here. The visual demos that we're talking about in stores are cheating because of the slow motion to improve the picture. Atmos audio label can also be misleading. I'd had to lower my expectations greatly. Excuse me. Yeah. So another thing to mention about those demos that you typically see in like a Best Buy or I don't know, Micro Center, depending on where you are. Other places, I say Walmart, but I don't know. I don't go into Walmart a lot. A lot of those demos are 60 frames per second. So the motion blur is gone pretty much, or it looks more or less like closer to that kind of real life soap opera effect than a movie shot at 24 frames per second, or even a TV show that's 30, or if you're watching like a UK show at 25, 25p. I think that is one of the things that people get turned off to, and that's probably why out of the box a lot of these TV sets still have like motion interpolation on, so it's not such a jarring difference between what you saw at Best Buy versus what you saw here. Again, though, I mean, you start seeing all these artifacts and stuff. It's like, what the hell, guys? Like, we don't need this stuff on. So I think that is one of the biggest things. And also, yeah, Atmos audio, it can be misleading in a way that we tend to see a lot of Atmos demos, not movies particularly, but like, a lot of the Dolby Atmos like branded demos or DTSX or Oro. They're meant to showcase the capabilities of a system in a short amount of time. So they're going to be very active in the height channels, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. That kind of same mentality of like seeing something in HDR in the showroom at 60 frames per second, getting it home and then watching like a TV show like Stranger Things, and you're like, doesn't look anything like it, like what I saw. What the hell? The same can be said for Dolby Atmos. There's a lot of people that may hear Dolby Atmos and they get home and they're not hearing, like they're watching that same show and they're not hearing all of this stuff going on above them when they feel like I should be hearing this all the time, you know? Like that's like the expectations are need to be set accordingly. It's like not every movie or show is going to have or needs to have a highly active Atmos mix. In fact, I would bet money that don't quote me on that. I would bet money that if a movie or TV show is too active, where you notice the height channels too much, that will actually take you out of the experience versus draw you in. Twister is a great example of that. I keep going back to the German import of the Turbine Edition. That is an incredibly incredibly active Atmos mix, and at times almost too active. And I'm mainly referring to like the slower scenes in the movie where there doesn't really need to be a whole ton of info going on up there, but there is. Because you can't have too much of a good thing, believe it or not. So yeah, I think that is something that needs to be addressed as well. And then I always go back to I remember seeing years ago I saw this on AVS forums. So I live in Florida, obviously. I've gone to Universal Studios numerous amounts of times. One of my favorite attractions growing up was the Terminator 2 3D attraction. And if you don't know what that is, you can look up clips on YouTube, but basically it's a mixture of like live action actors set against like a massive it's actually a massive triple 3D screen, right? And the actors are kind of, playing these characters and it's all dimly lit. So you're like, oh, that is Edward Furlong as John Connor, or that is Arnold Schwarzenegger up there. It was a cool show and very immersive, very involved. And I remember reading a thread on AVS forums, like, why can't we get 3D like that in the home? And I was like, well, what are you talking about? Like that experience is completely removed from like the home experience. Like you can't get that overall experience in the home. Like there are multiple things that draw you into that experience, right? So like there's like flashing lights that are on the floorboards. There's like smoke that fills a room. There's like uh lights and stuff that like will go off at certain times. It's a completely different immersive experience that you'll never be able to get in home because you're not standing there in front of people in an actual like space. And it's never going to be the same, so trying to compare those two experiences is like you can't expect that level at home. You just can't, like, it's not possible. And I think that that on a kind of grander level um is kind of what we're seeing here. Is like you can't expect everything to look like a demo or sound like a demo. um Thank you for coming to my TED talk. Sorry, yeah, I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, let's highlight some of this here real quick. So Willie says, isn't IMAX 70 millimeter equivalent to be equivalent of at least 16K? If so, I'm not settling for anything less at home. Yes. Yeah. So 70 millimeter IMAX is a different beast, right? Like it's intended to be viewed on like a freaking dome. Like if you guys have those dome screen, I want to say it's intended to be viewed on a dome, but like the screen size on those IMAX theaters that are actually projecting 70 millimeter. I mean, we're talking about, I don't know how big, it's like stories tall, right? Like 2 or 3 stories high. Um, and yeah, like the 70 millimeter is going to look freaking great on that at it's like 16K or something. But I don't know that it will ever hit. I'm like, okay, if I build a house just for the sole intent of having it as a movie theater with no like interior, I could see that now. It's just like you go into a house and it's just a movie theater. Like it's not even a home. It's just a movie theater. It's or like not even a theater, like just like the actual like theater itself, not the concession stands or anything, but just you walk in, it's just like right there in your face. That's kind of funny. Yeah, I've seen actual projected 70 millimeter IMAX film, and it's something to behold. But I never said I want that in my house. It was cool, but like I don't want that. Like I don't see it feasible ever for home use. That's just me, though. That's just me. Arad says refresh rates, HDR, better sound mixing, and true BT 2020 truly matter. Resolution is already there. I agree. Yeah, I think there's so much, and that's kind of like the point I wanted to kind of hammer home with this live stream, podcast, what have you, is we're already there with resolution. I really don't like. We really don't need to push that anymore. There are other parts of the technology that could benefit far greater than just increasing the output resolution. And I think that that is where the focus should be. Although I'm not in charge of these big companies, ultimately they're going to say we want to push 8K, and that's what they're going to do. Joe and Tail actually says 4K with less compression will probably be noticeably better for most people compared to 8K with high compression. Yeah, I agree. Because depending on how you're getting that 8K content, a movie is going to be highly compressed over streaming to fit that 8K, even with like a more efficient codec. I think that a 4K stream with less compression will probably look better. But who knows? I don't know that we'll ever get there to make that decision, or make that decision for ourselves. So we'll see. So Van Gool says, Joe and Tell, so we all have devices like receivers and TVs just upscale what we watch at 8K, like we upscale audio. Why did I highlight this? I forgot. Oh, hey, Elon's here. Well, he's here commenting. It said, just had a few minutes before we have dinner here. Thanks for taking the wheel this week, Brad. You're doing a great job. Give this man some love, people. Thank you, Elon. You are missed. I don't know what to do with myself over here by myself, just drinking coffee, talking to these fine people here. I appreciate everyone that is here, by the way. I really, yeah, it's just kind of me rambling tonight. So I apologize if there's like incoherentness. I don't know. I just like talking about this stuff, and I feel like there's so much polished material out there. It's like sometimes just like getting on a live stream and just chatting with all the flubs and all the ums and the blah blah blah, all the shit that comes from it, like that happens in real time. I don't know, it's genuine, it's cool. I like it. I try to I just got a ring notification and I noticed my wife picking up a package. Oh wait, no, that's you see what I mean? Yeah, there's a cat picture on here. Anyway, yeah, I think oh, Van Gool is sticking up for me here. Elon, he is great answering questions. I try. I think Elon and I have actually discussed this. I'm more of a video file, or I'm an audio. I don't want to say audiophile. I guess I am. I like good sounding audio, but I'm not like, I don't have like $80 million worth of equipment or anything. I am a video file though. I think that just because like I maybe went to film school like 20 years ago, and so like I've always loved film, and I've always like aspired to be a filmmaker, and so I just love when things look like the way like I know they should, you know what I mean? Like I love calibrating TVs and stuff. So when I see stuff like 8K and all this stuff, it's like I don't know. Now on the actual like film making side, yeah. Sorry, I just had to say Joe took a look at that T2 remaster you mentioned, and it does look hilariously bad. Joe, does it look like film to you at all? Like it looks like someone just I don't it's so muddy with no detail. It's like almost clinical, but like there's a lot of blurring on any motion, and it's just so distracting. And I don't understand when people are like, I don't see the problem here. I'm like, it's crazy. Like it does anyway. Um, I did mention, Joe, I don't know if you were here earlier. I did mention that I checked out the Aliens 4K Blu-ray, and while not as bad as the T2 remaster, and it wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be, ultimately, I went back to the 1080p Blu-ray. I found the detail level on the 1080p Blu-ray the previous release, not this one that's tied to this, because that's kind of struck from the same master. Um, it looked better. It looked better, even if the colors were slightly different, which is more accurate. I don't know. The grain structure was still there, and the people didn't have weird looking pores in their face because of the grain removal. Um, yeah, I still say the 4K. It still looks okay, but I would prefer they just not have touched the grain. Um, but yeah, to kind of sum up the entire live stream here in one go, bottom line, we've reached a point where we don't need better features. We don't need 8K. We don't need to be pushed on that. Um, we need better execution of the features that we currently have available. So better HDR, better refresh rates. Um, yeah, I mean that like the technology, like we can make 8K panels, we can make 16K panels, but I mean, anybody remember when LCDs and stuff first became popular, like in the computer monitor space, and how just god awful they were? But we dealt with it because, okay, I'm not. This isn't a 100-pound CRT monitor anymore. This is a flat panel. It's this thick. Remember they were this thick, and now they're like that thick. Um, yeah, we dealt with it, but like as technology has progressed, imagine trying to use one of those old monitors when they first came out to now. I'm not talking about CRTs, like the LCDs. They're awful. They're so bad. I actually have one in a closet, and I hooked it up recently just to like see what it would look like. And I was like, I was like, I can't even look at this. It's hard to look at. Um, yeah, it's super 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 the colors are weird. Granted, it's an old monitor, but the backlight really is where the thing really fails. Blacks are definitely not black, and I wouldn't even say they're a shade of gray. What's lighter than gray? It's almost white. Um, let's see. Elon actually says, I need to look into this, but I've recently become a member of Grove and the Peter Jackson King Kong and Pacific Rim. Both looked like 720p upscaled to 4K with DNR applied on top of that. Um, Highlights blown out too. Does Grove print their own physical media on the cheap? Is that why their prices are so good? I don't know what Grove is. What is Grove? Grove Entertainment Delivered. Do you? Oh, okay. Um, Grove.com. Here, we'll switch over to this thing here. So yeah, it looks like it's all physical media stuff. But I wonder, I'll have to check. I have both of those, Elon, and I'll have to check. I haven't I haven't watched the 4K Blu-rays of those, even though I own them. I think they're still in the I have quite a few movies like this. They're still in the wrapper. Yeah. I need to get through those. I've never even watched Dune Part 1. Like I need to it's still in the wrapper. I need to watch that. I'm not talking about the David Lynch one. I'm talking about the Denis Villeneuve one from a couple years ago. Yeah, I need to watch that. Let's see. All right, let me unshare this because it's showing a trailer and now I'm like, copyright, copyright. Um, don't get us Universal. Um, King Kong was blown out at the start with high contrast. You know, I'm kind of not surprised. Peter Jackson's another one. I've mentioned this before in a previous stream, I think. Um, he what he's done to the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films with his incessant use of like noise reduction and trying to make the Lord of the Rings look more like the Hobbit instead of the other way around, like trying to like make the Hobbit look like the Lord of the Rings. I would prefer that you didn't like fuck with them at all, and just leave them the way that like you originally shot them. But yeah, the Hobbit movies are plagued with like video artifacts as they were all shot, you know, on video, 48 frames per second. Um, like clipped highlights, all that stuff. They're actually, I remember getting the 4K Blu-rays of them. I was like ecstatic to see what they would look like, and I was appalled. Not appalled. They're not as bad as like T2, but man, they just they look decidedly digital. That's a phrase I'll start using now. Decidedly digital. They don't look like film, or like they look like they were shot for like TV. They just have that vibe to them. Whereas like the Lord of the Rings, even with the color timing, even with the DNR that's been applied on some scenes, it still looks like film for the most part. Could it look better? Yes. I think that they just went too harsh with the DNR, especially on like Two Towers and Return of the King. I noticed kind of like this, they dialed up the noise reduction on the second two movies. Um, Elon, if you're here, James asked, "Is Grub a safe place to buy movies from?" I would think so, because he said it's Universal's physical media outlet, so it's all Universal. I mean, I could be wrong, but yeah, could be wrong. Well, I'm seeing a lot of non-Universal movies, so maybe. So yeah, Joe also brings up a good point. You can't recreate detail that wasn't there in the first place. AI enhancement on a license plate or Golden Gate Bridge is cool. Faces not so much, at least not yet. Joe, I'm wondering if you had a chance to check out True Lies on 4K Blu-ray. Um, they went hardcore on the AI facial enhancements, where it almost looks as though they did some weird thing where like they they brought the exposure up on all the faces to make it like stand out, and um it's really distracting. It's also like DNR'd all to hell. Like it does not look good. And it's really unfortunate because we never got a Blu-ray release of that movie. I believe like a proper like Blu-ray release. Um yeah, I'd be curious to see, like, having come off of T2, if you check out True Lies, like what you would think of that. I didn't have a huge issue with The Abyss, the way it looked. Again, could it look better? Sure. But yeah, let the porn industry perfect the tech first. Yes. Yes. Um, yeah, Elon, I'm not sure. I do have Pacific Rim also on Vudu, like streaming. And what I will say to that is like it, a lot of people like call it a reference HDR experience. I found it a little almost too contrasty at times, but maybe that's the intent. I don't know. It can be very dark at times. Um, but I'll have to look at like the actual resolution. Da-da-da. Yeah, I think Van Gool actually brings up a good point. He says, Elon, is it the movie studio or director like James Cameron that wants a movie to look a certain way and thinks it looks good? I think that's 100% it. Um, it's like them and the director of photography or cinematographer that decide how a movie is going to look, and then they also work with like the colorist, right? At the end to kind of mold the movie and shape the colors how they want to shape them. What happens though, and what's been happening recently, is movies that were shot in the 80s and 90s and maybe even early 2000s. Um, these directors are remastering them for 4K Blu-ray, but they're changing the colors. It's technically called color timing. So, James Cameron has this affinity for teal and orange now. And so he'll even apply that to certain things like the movie Titanic, where it was never intended to look like that. It's like he's changed his mind over the years. And so he's remastering these movies like Aliens, The Abyss, True Lies, with the way he wants to do things now. And it's not too far off outside of like, adding CGI characters from like what George Lucas wanted to do with the original, trilogy, right? The original Star Wars trilogy. He wanted to clean it up. He wanted to make it look pristine, even though he shot this movie back in the 70s on a really low budget, like the first movie. And it's going to be grainy. It's supposed to be grainy, but he doesn't want that, anymore. He wants to fix that. And it's like, I don't think that needs fixing, honestly. Like you just leave it alone. Like just leave it alone. And yeah, it just The Matrix is another one. The first movie looks different on the, I remember like the colors looking different on the DVD, and then they like tinted everything green in The Matrix um on like the re-release on Blu-ray. And I'm like, but it's the first movie. Like you could not have changed it and people would have still realized that it's in The Matrix. Like you didn't need to change it. I'm not a fan of like going back um and kind of redoing things that you did years ago with all the experience and your preferences that you have now. I think that those things need to stand, you know, to the test of time and remain as they were, so to speak. Um, and I think that, a good example of that is, you guys remember when they, Steven Spielberg re-released E.T., they added CGI to ET, to make them. They added like other scenes, I think, but they added CGI facial features on top of ET. They replaced guns with walkie-talkies, things like that. And like the outcry from a lot of the fans were like, "What the hell are you doing to this movie? Like, it didn't need any of this." And then I think 2 or 3 years later, when it was coming out on Blu-ray, then my timing may be off. It may be a little longer than that. He was like, "Yeah, it's just gonna be the original movie. I'm not like that's what I shot, and that's what I want people to see. We're not gonna like work on remastering or moving forward anymore with this re-release because it wasn't his original vision." And I really kind of respected that because he was like, "Look, like I made a mistake. I don't know if like they paid him money to do it or something. Like, yeah, he realized like, yeah, this didn't work. And I don't know the logistics behind it. I don't know Steven Spielberg personally, much to the dismay of myself. I wish I did. But yeah, I really kind of like respected him when he's like, yeah, we're gonna release the original 77, or not the 77, 1982 movie. I'm thinking Star Wars again. But yeah, I mean, they didn't need to scrub it with, they didn't need to scrub the grain away. If you watch the 4K Blu-ray of ET, it looks amazing. It's got grain. That's fine. Um, it looks as good as it ever will, I think, or it ever has. And another movie that looks like that, I love 80s movies, is Real Genius. The 4K Blu-ray of Real Genius looks amazing. I remember when I got it, I was like, I couldn't wait to rewatch it because it's one of my favorite movies. And I love Val Kilmer in that movie. I just love the whole movie. We again, they didn't scrub the grain away. It's super grainy. Same with Weird Science, another classic 80s film. It's super grainy. They didn't like feel the need to like remove all that grain to make it look modern and sterile. Like it has character. It adds to that. I mean, we know it's an 80s movie. We know when it was filmed, right? It's kind of like plastic surgery. Like we know how old you are. You're not going to fool us into thinking that you're younger. We can see how, like, we know how old you are. So I let's see. We got some. I'm just like talking my butt off here. All right, I'm gonna highlight this one because it said, "Isn't a granny movie?" Now, a granny. I think. Oh, he. Isn't a grainy movie something similar to film mode or movie mode on TVs to be watched as it should be looked at? I'm not a fan of a grainy image. I prefer a smooth image. No, a grainy image is just how it's how film works. Like back in the day, they had, cheaper film stocks and film stocks that just had more grain, or they still have today. A lot of movies today are shot on digital, right? And so a lot of times grain is added back in post production, because the image might be too sterile or too smooth for what they want. To me, I don't. I think it's kind of whatever the original intent was is what I want to see. I don't prefer a grain-free image. I don't prefer a grainy image if that's not what the original intent was, right? What I don't like is when there is grain in an image and they remove all that grain, but in doing so, they remove all the fine detail out of the image. And that's kind of like what we're talking about with like Aliens and Terminator 2 is like these movies were never intended to be a grain-free experience, right? They were never intended to be clinical or sterile in the way that they are now. And that's where the kind of the issue arises when people go, well, it doesn't look like it originally did. Um, and I'm okay if someone says, I want this, I want the grain removed from this. Like if James Cameron's like, look, I don't like this, but I'm going to do it, but I understand people want the original, the way we shot it and the way we presented it back then. So I'm going to provide that version to you as well. There's no reason in 2024 with all the technology we have that we can't also provide the original kind of unaltered version for people that want that. Because I think choice is always a good thing. It's kind of like, do you guys remember when back in the day when you had like pan and scan blue DVDs and then you had widescreen DVDs? And you could choose between because some people were like, I want to see, like I'm seeing less of an image with the widescreen when we all know that really wasn't the case, but they wanted the image to fill their TVs. And so there were two versions of it. Whereas like, why can't we have that now with, or even included on the, like in a set where it's like 2 discs? I'd pay, I'd pay the same amount of money if they gave me the other version instead of the kind of clinical sterilized clean one. But yeah, I think it doesn't have anything to do with like film mode or movie mode on TVs. It has more to do with the actual like transfer itself and like how the film stock has been treated over the years, how it has been like how it was shot. Like Star Wars is a good example. It's if you like watch even like the original like VHS, you can see some of the grain structure in there. But it's hard to tell because like the VHS was really low resolution by comparison. Um, Van Gogh, I think you're right. I haven't seen No Time to Die, so I'm not sure. I do know that No Time to Die, I think that was Roger Deakins. I'm looking it up. I could be wrong. He's like a very famous cinematographer. Oh, he's shot Skyfall. I don't think he shot. Why can't I? Oh, it was Roger Deakins. Yeah. So he shot some of the most like popular films of all time. Shawshank. He did that. It's one of my favorites. Uh, let's see. Willie says, "Good for Spielberg. If Jaws had been made by Lucas, he'd change the shark to a CG one, and it would destroy the feel of the movie." Yeah, I have a feeling that that yeah, that would be the case. And we do give George Lucas a lot of shit, rightfully so, for changing those original movies, but he also has pioneered the way movies are made now. If you watch the Light and Magic documentary on Disney Plus, you kind of really see like how much time and money he invested in this technology to be where we're at now. Honestly, I'm going to say something that may be kind of controversial. I don't know that we would be on YouTube right now if he didn't invest things the way he did back in the day. I'm not saying he was directly responsible for YouTube or anything like that, but like to have all the technology that we have now, I think he had a hand in it. I don't think he was like solely responsible, but I think he had a hand in like a lot of the filmmaking technology that we even see in like cameras today, like in the camera I'm using now. Like there's a reason that camera exists, and I don't think that you can discredit George Lucas for kind of helping the industry move in that direction. Um, yeah, Joe and Tell brings up a good point. If we can watch a movie at home with the same quality as in the theaters back in the day, why is that not enough? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It just seems that like, do you remember when William Friedkin? I'm gonna butcher his last name. He did a French Connection. He did The Exorcist. He kind of went back and when the Blu-ray for the French Connection came out, he changed the color grading and the vibe of the movie completely, to the point where didn't even resemble the movie that people saw in the theater that people grew up watching. It looked like a completely different film. It changed the vibe of the whole movie. And he was like, I like it. I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's my movie. I can do what you want or do what I want with it. And he kind of like back on his word eventually and changed it back to the way it was for the next release because he's like, yeah, it really wasn't. I was guy's out of his mind. Um, yeah, to me, it's just like we do. Yeah, that's a Rob is here. He says feature film professional here. 8K totally waste of resources, and they tend to do add grain to make it look more like film. And Rob, if you're still here, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's typically they use actual um, film stock elements from certain like let's say uh, Kodak Eastman film stock. Like they have actual like film stock they can pull from and overlay on the image, right? And actually, it's an organic film stock that is being overlaid on the image. So you're not digitally creating this film grain, right? Like you're actually pulling it from like actual film stock. I know that stuff out there exists. I have a few plugins that have that stuff in it. I think Film Convert Nitrate is probably one of the biggest ones. Um, but yeah, let's see. Let's see. Elon says, unfortunately, I think it's just a generational thing. Just like kids who've never known analog, they also don't know film and seeing a movie in a theater with an old school film projector. Yeah, I do remember that. I mean, we've talked about that on stream before. It's also clean um, with digital cameras and digital projection. Uh, are they? Oh, yeah, it is very clean. It's almost like clinical in a way. Um, Van Damage says, I'm scared for the Terminator 4K Blu ray release later in the year. Me too. Me too, but we'll see. Um, oh, yeah. I remember those scan lines at home the TVs gave us. I do too. Very well. And Elon says, gotta run, Brad. Thanks again for doing this. Much love to you and everyone tuning in. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Elon, for stopping by. I appreciate it. Um, let's see here. All right, we have some questions. I'm going to highlight a few of these and then answer the questions, and we'll wrap things up here. Let's see. So if you have a question right now, put a Q in front and throw it my way. I'll mark it. Sorry, my camera is like being a little jittery right now. Um, let's see here. Rob says this is in regards to using real film stock. We use real stock. There are algorithms, but people there are algos, but people prefer the stock. It's hard to tell. And then Joe does bring up a good point. A film overlay typically doesn't look that real because real film grain causes microscopic displacement changes. It's not. It's about texture, not just dots, and that's very, very true. Um, I think that's why if you just kind of throw an overlay on a digital image, it's not going to look the best. Um, that's okay, Jose. I'll try to find it. I may have start it. Was it about Techno Dad's tip, Jose? Because I have it starred here. Um, Yeah, there is something about that though, Willie. So Willie says, I remember when films were shown on TV, they were frequently scans of filthy old prints covered in dirt and scratches. Those were slash weren't the days. Yeah, there is something about the grittiness of those transfers, though. I think for certain movies, especially like westerns, the grittiness really adds to um, that movie. You know, it's kind of like watching, you know, a lot of the old westerns like Magnificent Seven with Denzel Washington. I'm kidding. The original Magnificent Seven, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The like all these transfers are great on 4K. Like the 4K Blu-ray of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think that's the one I'm referring to. I get some of them confused sometimes. But like there's no HDR, which is okay. Like not like it didn't detract from it, but like it's super it's very grainy, but it looks incredible. Like it looks so like you get to see all the detail. Like they really treated it with respect to the source, like to the original movie. Um Joe and Tell says he's got to run. So, but yes, I thank you for stopping by, Joe, and I will try to handle the video side of things. Um, but yeah, there's just something about that kind of grittiness that does add to the overall appeal of those like older westerns, and it you know we're at a point now where we can kind of digitally replicate kind of camera stock and uh the look of like an 8 millimeter camera from like a high quality camera. Like there are things that exist that allow you to do that. Um, you know, I for one, I don't have the resources to like if I want to shoot a video or I want to shoot a short film and I want to have a sequence or a part in the movie where it looks like maybe a character is shooting on 8 millimeter camera. I don't have the resources to go buy an 8 millimeter camera, buy the film, shoot it from that character's perspective to cut it into the movie, have it develop, then get it did like for it over into, you know, the project. It's just not feasible for me, like from like a no budget, low budget person, a filmmaker. Um, the like it's just not possible. Basically, that's what I'm saying. It's like so I'd rather use a plugin that's $60 that can maybe get you 70 to 80% of the way there because like it's more about telling the story than about the actual effect, right? So yeah. Um, so here we go. Okay, so I have 7 questions starred. I'm gonna run through these. If you have any questions, add a queue. I'm not gonna look at the other comments now. I'll run through those again because I'm in the starred section. And then we'll wrap things up here. So also let me close this. I think that's what's causing the camera to be blah blah blah. Okay. I already answered Crispy's. So James actually says, why is 8K on its way out when TV and streaming broadcasters haven't switched to 100% 4K and Atmos or DTS? Um, I think basically my goal in titling it that and calling it that was it's never 8K has never really caught on. And it's been out for quite a few years now. Now, yeah, it's true that 4K did take a while to kind of saturate the market, to kind of penetrate that and replace a lot of 1080p TVs. I think it's also rare now these days that you don't see many 1080p TVs, especially higher TVs, like higher sizes, in Best Buy. It's predominantly like 4K TVs. You can still buy 1080p TVs in a smaller form factor, although the price difference between like a 1080p TV and a 4K TV, depending on what you're getting, may not be worth it. But yeah, I think overall, I don't think AK has really caught on the way that a lot of these companies expected. Um, we even see like companies like the whole like start of this stream was, you know, Sony removing that 8K badge from the PS5, which, you know, one could argue there that okay, they're removing it now, so does that mean it was like false advertising from the beginning, considering it never actually supported 8K output? I don't know. That's a topic that is for you know something else entirely. But I think that yeah, I think it may be on the way out. Could it make a comeback and kind of all of a sudden kind of blossom and explode where like it becomes more affordable and it becomes a standard maybe. We haven't, like you said here, we haven't even switched over to 100% 4K in Atmos or DTS. So it's like really hard to say for sure that 8K is 100% on the way out, which is why it was posed as a question as well. Um, yeah, it just seems like the industry, every year at like CES, we see some, or CES and CEDIA, we see some manufacturers kind of pushing their 8K tech, but predominantly it's more about like, oh, we have OLEDs with higher peak brightness, or we have mini LEDs or micro LEDs. I think the push is for that. One of my cats is knocking on the door here, trying to get in. Um, moving on here, Toxmod was 8K banned in certain countries. That's actually a good question. Where is 8K banned? So yeah, it appears that from March 2023, this is based on a article from VMI.TV. Many TV sets, especially OLED and 8K, could be prohibited from being sold in the European Union due to high power consumption. That's a very significant portion of the whole market. So yeah, I mean, potentially we could be seeing, uh, due to power constraints or power usage, we could be. Why is my camera not focusing? Sorry. We could see some of these being banned. Like I know, like um, certain types of like there was a thing where it's like, oh yeah, OLEDs might be banned from your like parts of Europe because of the overall power consumption. And I think that all these manufacturers started being like, hey, we have a eco mode that's on our TVs that will reduce the power consumption. They were kind of able to get away with it with that. Um, let's see here. So hopefully that answers that. Jose says recently I saw that Techno Dad gave the tip. Um, the rear height should be set on the AVR as top middle. Have you tried something like that? I have not. Um, that's actually interesting. I wonder. Yeah, I'd be curious. I'll have to look up what you're talking about. Because I'd be curious to see what that sounds like. Like again, I'm always open for experimentation. I don't feel like moving my height channel speakers. So if the requirement is they need to be a certain certain place, like I just don't really want to have to move them around. 'Cause that's kind of a pain. Believe it or not, I like experimentation as long as I don't have to move a lot of stuff around. But yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to look up that. I'm gonna have to look that up. Let's see. Willie says since install. I don't. This is kind of a general question for everybody, I guess. Since installing front wides, I now tend to upmix 5.1 and 7.1 tracks to make use of all 15 speakers. Sorry. I used to think I was an audio purist. Not anymore. Anyone else do this? I tend to. Elon and I actually talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago, where I basically asked, um, do you tend to upmix movies that are in 5.1 from say like certain directors that you maybe I don't know, have a respect for or something? And he mentioned The Killer from David Fincher, which is a 5.1 mix on Netflix. And I think he said he didn't upmix that. Um, I used to, like you, Willie, I consider myself a purist. Um, but here lately, I've been like I mentioned earlier in the stream, we've been watching Stargate SG-1, and I've been up mixing that with DTS Neural X. Um, yeah, it sounds awesome. There's been times where it actually is very convincing. It has a very cool height information that's extracted from that. It's like surprises me. Yeah, I don't consider myself an audio purist. I don't run with all of my speakers set to flat or anything like that either. I've kind of found over the years what I tend to like. than what I think sounds good to my ears, and also using magic beans from Joe and Tell to determine the house curve for my room has helped tremendously as well. So yeah. Let's see. Undoppable says or asks, is the appeal nostalgia or do you genuinely enjoy that texture? If you're talking about film grain, I genuinely enjoy that texture. It's not. I mean, maybe there's a hint of nostalgia there for me. But yeah, I don't know. It's like kind of watching National Lampoon's Vacation and expecting it to look super like modern and clean. It's like I don't like it just doesn't really like I know that the movie's like was made in like 1978 or whenever it was. I know it's not supposed to look like I know it's not gonna look like that. Um, and if you're talking about like the westerns, yeah, I think that texture definitely adds to the vibe of the movie. You know, because it's all it's all fake, right? It's all an illusion. We're making like we're making this magic frame from these like from these like moving still pictures essentially. And so anything we could do to trick the camera lens into seeing something a certain way or presenting it on a screen a certain way, it's all a trick, right? It all needs to be additive to the story though, and to that kind of time period, I think. And I know we're kind of like getting off into the weeds here a little bit with this, but yeah, I think it just definitely yeah, it may be a little bit of nostalgia, but more importantly, like I think it's like the the movies were made in the 70s or the movies were made in the 30s, you know? I don't want, you know, Metropolis from like the 1920s to look like a modern film. Don't colorize that movie, you know? It's like it's black and white. It needs to remain in black and white. You know, I'm that kind of person when it comes to like if something was originally in black and white, I don't have an interest in seeing it in color. Um, you know, that's just me. Uh, you know, Mad Max Fury Road is a case where and Logan is another case where like the directors actually had a like made a black and white version of each of those movies and they have a different vibe, but they're like that's not going to replace the other movie. But like here, we'll put it on the 4K Blu-rays or whatnot and check it out. Like, I think Mad Max Fury Road is only available digitally in black and white, but it definitely has a different vibe to it. Yeah, I'm that kind of guy, I guess. Um, let's see. Jay Rashim, Richie. I'm anyway. I'm not gonna try to butcher the name further. Is DTSX still decodable from Marantz? Yeah, it should be. Um, unless you're talking about the new IMAX enhanced stuff. If you have a newer receiver, uh it should do that no problem. I think it's like DTX Pro that some of the older receivers would probably just fall back to DTSX. So yes. Oh yeah, that's another black and white movie as well. Justice League, Justice in Gray from Zack Snyder's. Yes. Yes, from my understanding, it should handle DTSX no problem on an SR8015. That's still a kick-ass receiver, pre-pro, even like a receiver slash pre-pro. It's a great pre-pro as well. It's also a great receiver. Let's see. Let's see. Got a couple questions here. Um, James asks, "Why is YouTube showing videos that play or shows Atmos video when YouTube doesn't support it? Weird." I honestly, James, I think as a content creator myself, I guess, it's about the algorithm, right? So if you put, you know, Dolby Atmos demo in like a video title or thumbnail, the algorithm will pick that up and recommend it, like even though it's not true. I hate it because when someone, I've had a couple of local clients that I've done calibrations for, and they specifically cite watching a demo on YouTube, and it took everything in me to remain professional, but I did. But I really wanted to go, like, I just wanted to shake them and be like, "What are you doing?" Like, you've spent all this money on gear. He actually had an SR8015 and a God, it was like a it was a 9 bed channels, 6 height channels, and 4 subs, and he was using YouTube as demo material. Yeah. It was a uh, that was a hard one. That was for me, that was just like, "Oh, yeah." So, that is that is yeah. It is weird, but I think that's why they do it to kinda get the clicks, unfortunately. Um, oh, let's see, so, Jose says, "On my RZ50, which is an Onkyo, all Dolby goes to Dolby Surround and all DTS goes to DTS-X codecs." Um, yeah, I think that that's something that, where is it? Where is it? What was I talking about? If, yeah, if, I think this is in response to the upmixing comment or the DTS-X still decodable from Marantz. Um, I may have misunderstood, and if I'm sorry if sorry, I'll highlight that in a second. If I misunderstood, Jay, if you're asking if you could use DTS-X as like the up mixer, I was thinking of like the lossless codecs like Dolby Atmos and um, DTS-X. But if you're talking about like Neural X, like the up mixing, I do think that on more modern receivers, they limit you to what Jose was talking about on the RZ50. So if it's a Dolby signal, you can only use Dolby Surround Up Mixer. If it's a DTS signal, you can only use DTS Up Mixers. You can't like mix and match, from my understanding. And I don't know. Again, don't quote me on that, but I remember reading something about that a few years ago. So I have an older receiver. I have a Denon X6300H that you can do all that stuff on, that you can, use whatever up mixer you want. Uh, so I'm curious if that's what you're talking about. Then you may have run into a limitation with that. Although I think on the SR8015 you should be able to, unless it was a firmware update that like prevented that from happening, because they did at one point remove center spread on their Denon and Marantz receivers at one time. But I think they added that back. And then James, I know this isn't a question to me, but FOMO is the fear of missing out. Um, so yeah. And then the thing I was laughing at was Mia saying I wouldn't be able to handle that. LOL. I've had to handle a lot in my professional AV career years. But geez, yeah, it's kind of like when a client buys like a massive 4K HDR display and they're watching a DVD, and you're like, like yeah, I've calibrated a couple TVs, and I'm by no means a professional calibrator, but when they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll stick on this," and it's like, "No, I'm sorry, buddy. I actually have that disc with me in 4K. Like we'll watch that, But it's like when you're like, you might as well just be grabbing a laser disc instead of a DVD at that point. I was like, why did you spend so much money on all this stuff to watch your DVD collection? Uh, Oh, okay, okay, I see what you're talking about. So as they're trying to get it from Disney Plus, IMAX Enhanced, and DTS for my TV Disney app, going to the SR8015. Yeah, I've not had any luck at all getting DTSX out of even any DTS out of Disney Plus on any of the devices I own. I have an LG OLED that does not. It's the C1. It does not support DTS over eARC. So that's a no go there. And I don't know that I have any devices that officially support it. So I have an NVIDIA Shield and an Apple TV. I know that Apple TV does do DTS, but I don't think it does DTSX. But yeah, it's kind of a crapshoot right now with DTSX on Disney Plus. I don't think the rollout was great at all. And then lastly, yeah, um, Mia, thank you for stopping by the way. Nice to have you here. She said, hounded people on why all the parts of the solutions I sold were necessary. People would try to back out of buying proper 4K sources, and I'd very frankly tell them that they would essentially be wasting their investment without a proper source. Yes, it's yeah, I'm right there with you. It's so hard to if someone is set in their ways and you're trying to actually help them for their benefit, but all they want to do is be like, you're just trying to get me to buy stuff. It's really hard to get them to see the other side, right? So you really have to be like tactful in how you approach that. But yeah. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this stream, guys. Yeah, we've been going for like almost 2 hours now. So I want to thank you everyone for joining. Elon and I will be back together next week. So it will be less of this guy talking and more of Elon talking, I promise. And I just want to thank you all for joining, asking your questions, hanging out with me. I'm hopefully you had a good time. I know I had a good time talking about this stuff. Always a pleasure to just like hang out with you guys and chill. And yeah, just you know, just be real with you guys, because like I said earlier, there's like I could make polished videos. That's kind of what I do, but I just like to connect like this. It's just nice to just let the camera roll and just talk about stuff without worrying about like I got to edit that out because I messed that up. Who cares? But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining, and we will catch you next week.